Hi, everybody. Good morning. Hi, Alex. Hi, James. Hi, Amy. Hey, Tom. Hi, Roxana. Hi, Pippa. Hi, everybody. So lovely to see you all. Good morning.
Morning, all.
And a huge welcome to our February Includability Employee Support Group. It's so lovely to see you all. As ever, if this is your first time with us on an Includability ESG, then a huge welcome to the family. It's wonderful to have you with us this morning. And of course, to all of our brilliant returning community, just amazing to be by your side as ever. Once again, we have an extraordinarily inspirational lineup of three fabulous guest speakers for you across the next hour to help inspire you on your journey in creating a healthier and a more inclusive workplace culture for your business. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the brilliant Annie Ableman, founder of Mentor Mums, the amazing Roxana Francombe, partnerships executive at Planetmark, and of course, the wonderful Saski, everyday pride LGBTQIA plus inclusion consultant. And of course, please do take a moment to introduce yourselves on the chat feed, should you be happy to do so. We have the most amazingly, rapidly growing, and extraordinarily supportive community here at Includability, which you are all part of. And it's a community that is superb at facilitating great introductions. So please do tell us about your world, what you do, your upcoming events, how we can support you and celebrate your business. We'd love to shout about the incredible work that you're doing and to help provide any support as and when you need us. We'll also be sharing a number of links over the course of the next hour, and Chris, our lovely comms manager, will as ever be dropping that gold into the chat feed. Upcoming events, celebration days, resource links, video links, and of course, supporting with any questions that you might have during the ESG itself. And whilst, of course, we do have a number of our brilliant regular community already with us this morning, if you would be interested in finding out a little bit more as to how your company can become involved, perhaps as an Includability Gateway member, or indeed certifying as an includability committed employer, and the benefits and the resources that you can access, then please don't hesitate to drop a message either to James, our lovely marketing director, or to myself. We'd be delighted to help and to guide you through those steps, and of course, answer any questions that you might have. And now, just before we introduce our first fantastic guest speaker of the morning for you, we have a very exciting date for your diary. Our first in person Includability Links and Drinks event of 2025 will be held on Thursday, the 17th of April from 6 p.m. until 9 p.m. in partnership with the lovely X and Y team at their Five Fields building in Grosvenor Square in London. As our wonderful includability community, you are all invited. Please bring your teams with you. It would be incredible to see you all. The venue's so lovely. The event is totally free and it is entirely focused on making you feel totally comfortable, introducing you to inspirational people who align with you and your interests and your values. The hugs are totally optional. But James, Chris, and I are thoroughly available if called upon. And Chrissy will be popping the Eventbrite link into the chat feed now. So please do sign up. We'd be absolutely thrilled to see you. And now, for our first guest speaker, I'm delighted to introduce the wonderful Annie Ablemans, founder and CEO of the multi-award-winning Mentor Mums. Annie, it is so lovely to see you as always, and the virtual floor is yours.
Hello, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Dave. And it's a pleasure to be here with you in Includability this morning. As Dave said, I'm the founder of Mentor Mums. In the name of inclusivity, I'm just going to put it out there that that was a relevant name when we started. We now support parents and carers of every type. So please feel aware that we're including everybody. We probably need a rebrand. We were set up in 2020. I had my first child when I was back in 2016, and I returned to work as you do, just assuming that you could kind of pick up where you left off after having a child. The child's in childcare, right? So I think it's fine that I can just crack on and do my job. However, what I learned and what many of you will know is that when you have a child, you often everything else in your life has changed, even if your job has stayed the same. So for some of us, that will be that we suddenly have a thing that we love, a person that we love so much more, or in a competing way to our job that used to be the sole focus. It might be that we still love our job, but we have time constraints, or that having stepped away, we might have faced physical or mental health challenges during that time of becoming a parent. Or it might be that we're so itching to get back, but actually having stepped away and missed out on that work validation that we often get around our self-worth and the things that we're really good at, we can go back to work sometimes feeling absolutely terrified of what's to come. And so we get a lot of support often through things like pregnancy and even things like breastfeeding that are a brand new journey as new parents. And that's really great that that support exists. But I found that when we return to work, it's a bit of a step into the void. And so over time, I thought, how can we support that? And I kind of set up Mentor Mums by accident. The first thing that happened was my friend, a few years after me, or a year or so after me, went back to work after having her first child to be an infectious diseases doctor in a hospital. And she said, Annie, how do you do it well? How do you go back to work? And I was like, well, I work in communications, and I had a haircut and I bought some new clothes and I mugged up on my comms knowledge, and that was great. I didn't have to go back and make life or death decisions in the first few days. And I really didn't know how I could best advise her to be confident in that return. But I realized that we could perhaps match her. I knew someone who'd had two maternity leaves and returned to work as a hospital doctor. And actually, she would be very well placed to give Liv the support she needed as she returned. And so that was kind of the accidental birth of Mentor Mums. And we realized that we could set up a network that is completely free to access for anyone who needs it, where we could provide sessions of mentoring to help somebody kind of transition back in a way that makes them feel confident and able to sustain their career in a way that they don't fall off just because they've become a parent. And so that network has now grown and grown. It's still completely free to access, and we are a not-for-profit. So that's always something that we're kind of struggling to keep going, but we really believe in it. And we've now generated more than 5,000 hours of mentoring support for returning parents. And they each get 6 hours over 6 months. So it's not a small intervention, it's a long-term thing, which allows them not just to kind of get the wheels back on, but actually then think, okay, what happens next with my career? How can I grow? How can I develop? And where do I take this? And so I thought when I set this up that I'd be overwhelmed with people wanting mentors. But what was amazing was I was also overwhelmed with mentors. And that is a real testament to how hard this journey is, and also how many people are passionate about changing that for the future. So I'm really pleased and proud of the work that I've done, but more importantly, that our volunteer network have done to actually transform lives and help people get promotions and pay rises, but most importantly, stay in their careers, because I think a lot of people feel that they need to step out if they have young children, or take a step back and just wait until their kids are at school. I think it's possible to keep going, and that's really something that as business leaders, I'm sure, is of real interest to you. So I'm going to talk now about, I guess, what it means to engage with this challenge for you as a business, and also, I guess, what I think is the bigger piece of the picture and the puzzle that we're looking at. So we take calls from people every week, all different types of returners, people who are, as I said, low in confidence and feeling a bit worried about returning. We also hear from people who are really excited to be back, can't wait to kind of leave the nappies and the nursery rhymes behind and really, head back and crack on and get promoted. We also hear from people who are citing unfair treatment. And that's not just the big headline redundancy that sometimes happens and gets talked about, but also more subtle things like management restructures that result in people being put back into roles that weren't the ones they left and that they don't necessarily want to do, or mat leave covers being kept on in someone's place. Sometimes it's flexible working requests that are declined, or sometimes it's the fact that a workplace just doesn't make the adjustments that make someone feel welcome when they return, and so they kind of feel pushed out. So there are, of course, laws against this kind of stuff, but when people return postpartum, they're quite often in a vulnerable position. And as I said, they have low confidence, low resilience, and sometimes it doesn't feel like the right time to challenge that. And so often our mentors are able to give someone that confidence. We don't want people to have to leave their jobs. We just want them to be able to have those difficult conversations with managers and leaders so that they can ask for what they really need and find those joint solutions. And I think that is one of the things that our mentors really help people to get. So many of you might have things like a support app for parents and for well-being within your organization. You might have maternity coaches lined up to help returners come back. But I think returning to work and having children and being a working parent is an ongoing process. And for me, it's about kind of creating a culture organizationally that can support working parents for as long as they need that, because we're still parents of like teenagers and adults, I hear. Mine are 8, 3, and 1. So I've got that journey to come. Um, and so, yeah, we offer lots of content around that kind of thing. And if you want to chat to me about what Mentor Mums offers to support parents, we can do that. But what I really want to say is that we need to make sure that organisations embed that support for working parents. If we wait until people have been hit by the challenges, it's just going to be a sticking plaster. Some of you will have heard the term leaving loudly. And this is actually a term that was coined by Robert Wright-Brooke, who was at the time PepsiCo CEO back in 2017 in New Zealand and Australia. And he talked about the importance of encouraging senior leaders to leave loudly when they left the office to care for children. And this is to show staff that it's okay to prioritize work-life balance and foster that culture where it's okay to be flexible and make that the norm. And I think where we have the privilege to step out of work unnoticed, that's where it's our duty to leave loudest, because we're the ones with the position of power. And so if you're taking back a message to your businesses, I think what I want to reiterate is the importance of just investing thoughtfully in your returners. When people start families, they have swathes of knowledge. They're usually in a mid to senior position in their career. They have so much experience that you really want to retain. And it really does come down to a business bottom line. So I think in order to do that, think about the adjustments you can make, whether that's a phased return, a reinduction program, the choices that they need, as well as the things that you need from them. So I've got 3 key takeaways and then I'll finish. I think for me, if you invest in your returners, they'll remember it. So give them grace during this life transition, and they will reward you in spades. And this support isn't a nice to have. It will save you thousands in terms of the recruitment cost of a replacement if they leave. So it is a business point. Secondly, like all issues around diversity inclusion, I think we all need to be allies for working parents, whether we are interested in that realm of things or not. Think about what you can do to make this work for them, whether that's changing the time of a meeting or arranging socials that don't clash with the nursery pickup times. And the third thing, final thing from me, is just think about, instead of thinking, how can I cover someone's role when they're off? How can I make sure that they're still going to be here in 2 years' time? What are they going to be doing? How are they going to be fulfilled? And how am I going to make sure that we together have a vision for what that looks like? And I think if we start looking at people in that way, rather than just as a resource to cover, we will really start to see change. Thanks very much.
Annie, thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful. What a team, so inspirational, as are the incredible parents and carers that you work so hard, you and the mentoring team, to support. And just as a reminder, Annie's Return Ready Kit Day course, which is all designed to set your parent and carer employees up for success after leave, will be running on the 6th of March in London. It's an incredible day. So many topics are covered. And of course, you'll receive your designated mentor for your first 6 months back at work that Annie talked through. So please do reach out to Annie. She's amazing. If you'd like to know more, and Chris, I know, has also dropped that contact information into the feed. Annie, thank you again for all you do, and it's just really, really wonderful to see you as always. And now for Our second guest speaker, I'm delighted to introduce the brilliant Roxana Francombe, Partnerships Executive at Planet Mark. So much love for the incredible work Planet Mark do. Roxana, it's incredible to see you as always, and the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dave. Hi, everyone. So I've got some slides to share. I've got a presenter view. So I'm going to try and share the right slides. You can't see the presenter view. So just let me know if, can everyone see the slides, and just slides, no presenter view? Okay, fantastic. Let's get going. So, hi everyone. Thank you so much, Dave, for having me. This is my first time in a includability. I know Planet Mark comes to quite a lot of these, but this is my first time, so I'm delighted to be here. And it was really interesting, Annie, your introduction to mental mums. So yes, my name is Roxana, or Roxy, and I work in the policy and partnerships team at Planet Mark. Our team is responsible for building and nurturing relationships with an ecosystem of organizations that share our values effectively, like includability. And Planet Mark is a net zero certification provider. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means and why we care about it. So first of all, a bit of scene setting with the climate crisis. So I'm sure a lot of people might already be aware of this, but this is just a figure to highlight the carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere over the past 500,000 years. So as you can see, atmospheric carbon dioxide has periods of high and low, which correlates to the Earth's cooling and warming periods. But since 1950, the levels of carbon dioxide has skyrocketed to never really before seen levels in the past 500,000 years. And this coincides with the Industrial Revolution, when we started burning fossil fuels en masse. And the reason we are worried about levels of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere is because it is a greenhouse gas. And in effect, it traps heat into the Earth's atmosphere. So another way of visualizing the climate crisis is the climate stripes. And many of you might have seen these already, but they were developed in 2016 by Professor Ed Hawkins from the University of Reading. And how we read these climate stripes is from left to right, with the left-hand side being from 1850 and the right-hand side being from 2024. So each stripe represents the average temperature for a single year relative to the average temperature over the period from 1961 to 2010. So shades of blue indicate cooler than average years, while red highlights years that were hotter than average. So without explaining, we can see that shift towards darker red. And the climate stripes have actually been used as a global symbol and reminder of the slow creep towards a climate disaster, used by the UN, by news outlets, on the sides of London buses, and also by Andrew Griffiths, who's the Director of Policy and Partnerships, blazer jacket, which he wears to big events. And he got it tailored, handmade, which is, yeah, just to highlight the climate stripes. What does this actually mean, though, the high levels of carbon dioxide in the air? And what do we mean when we talk about net zero? So when it comes to carbon, the problem can be simplified to this, which is an imbalance between the carbon sources and the carbon sinks. So carbon sources are anything that puts carbon emissions into the atmosphere. So human activities like burning fossil fuels, mining, travel, and carbon sinks are often natural ecosystems like forests, mangroves, peat bogs that absorb that carbon dioxide back from the Earth atmosphere. And getting these into balance is really what we mean by carbon neutrality and net zero. And it's what we're trying to do on a global scale. But when it comes to business strategies, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So how do we measure and evaluate businesses' impact on the environment in terms of these emissions? And it's not just carbon dioxide, although we tend to focus on that more as well, these are all the potent gases that go into the Earth's atmosphere, but well, we'll go into how we measure these emissions. So first of all, we'll talk about scopes 1 and 2. Now, sorry, my apologies if people have already heard of these before, but just in case for everyone in the room. So scope 1 is direct emissions from owned and controlled sources. So an example of this would be fuel burned in company vehicles and on-site energy production. And scope 2 is indirect emissions from purchased electricity, and heat. Now, scope 3 is where it gets a bit more complicated. So scope 3 is all your other indirect emissions throughout your value chain, so both upstream and downstream. And you can see there's currently 15 categories of scope 15 emissions. I'm sure they will grow as we learn more and more about how businesses impact the atmosphere, but these vary from employee commuting and upstream activities all the way to what your company invests in, the leased assets, how that product that your company produces is treated in its end of life. And all of these represent a holistic view of your business's impact on the environment. Now, what is net zero? So this is the theoretical net zero curve from 2020 to 2050. And everyone starts somewhere. So this orange dot at the very start, 100%, represents an organization setting their carbon emissions benchmark. What are their current emissions? And what goals do we make from there? The blue dot represents, well, the government's target of cutting emissions by 50% by 2030, which is only 5 years away, and would also represent a very ambitious target for an organization to set. Now, the grey dot, this is the government's target of reaching net zero in the UK by 2050. And the reason this grey dot is not at zero is because there is recognition that there will be some emissions in a business's impact that we just cannot reduce to zero. They are the hardest to abate emissions, we would call. And that remaining 10% can be neutralized via carbon offsets, which are effectively carbon credits that we can purchase from verified sources. So this is what the critical path to net zero looks like. So why net zero? In summary, the moral imperative to act on sustainability and climate couldn't really be clearer. But this, combined with a commercial opportunity and risk of not taking action, we're seeing the business community galvanizing their sustainability efforts. In addition, more and more regulation is coming in to facilitate this shift, and perhaps most notably the Paris Agreement and the commitment to reach net zero by 2050, which was one of the latest laws made in the UK in 2019. So to address the climate crisis, the UK government have committed by law to reaching net zero carbon by 2050. This means that every UK business, from micro businesses to large undertakings, must reduce their total greenhouse gas emissions by at least 90%, so that grey dot, by the end of 2050, and at least 50% by 2030. To track progress against these targets, environmental reporting is already a legal requirement for large businesses, and we can expect this mandatory reporting to trickle down in the future by looking into and working on your sustainability strategy. Now you are getting ahead of the curve. Here's some more statistical representations of the business case for sustainability. And this was a study done by IBM. The resource is just on the bottom of the slide. And it varies from everything from consumer choices when making purchases to new employees looking for their next role, what they're looking for in their new company. And also a vast majority of investors planning to act on sustainability in the next 12 months, and a majority of executives considering a sustainability strategy to be essential in order to remain competitive. So bringing this back to Planet Mark, how do we work with all organizations and sizes of all sizes and industries to empower net zero? So introducing to you are the Planet Mark certification, net zero certification program. So we work with all sizes, all organizations of all sizes, in both helping them to embark on a net zero journey, but also progress through to those ambitious goals. And that is why we have developed 5 different member packages, 4 certification levels. So the 4 certification levels is what we see on the board, all towards one solution, which is net zero. The reason there is 5 different member packages, but only 4 certifications, is because in that first certification level, Planet Mark Certified Business, there are actually 2 different packages, and that relates to what we measure in the scope 3. So that big, complicated 15 different categories. The first level is just the core scope 3, and then the second level would be your entire scope 3 chain. But we just offer those 2 different packages to make it more accessible for organizations to just start their journey that can't maybe measure all of their scope 3. But on each certification level, we work with Planet Mark members using our well-known measure, engage, and communicate framework. And each package layers additional support to help understand regulatory compliance, deliver stakeholder education and training, identify practical decarbonisation solutions, and provide access to expert advice and a supportive community on the Planet Mark Academy. And of course, we also want to help you communicate your sustainability journey to your audiences. So that's also part of the communicate pillar. Right, going back to the critical path to net zero, how does our program fit along this graph? So we have designed our program around how we see businesses progressing along this trajectory. So starting with measuring and small reductions before measuring more and putting in place those longer term plans to get you to net zero by 2050. Within 3 years of joining Planet Mark, we normally expect members to be ready to establish targets and a transition plan with support from our strategy team. And once those near-term targets have been met, they start working toward their long-term targets in order to reach the net zero milestone. So we understand regulation and policy can be a really challenging part of this. So the easiest way for you to stay ahead of the curve on net zero is to be part of a community that is actively helping to design that curve. We are one of 10 official Race to Zero partners supporting businesses worldwide, meaning that when an organization makes a net zero commitment with us, it is automatically recognized by the UN. We also helped develop the ISO net zero guidelines and have been recognized as the first worldwide early adopter for the way we have aligned our net zero program with the recommendations. And finally, we are one of around 20 organizations who have helped to develop the UK net zero building standard. And I'd like to finish my presentation with the UK Net Zero Business Census. So in 2024, Planet Mark and the UK Business Climate Hub underwent a major research project, the Net Zero Business Census. And the objective was to assess net zero measures being implemented by organisations as a benchmark for UK industry progress. And what this looked like is we had over 2,000 responses to our survey. And from that data, that was organisations of all sizes across the UK, all different industries. We were able to draw some conclusions and a report was made, which I hope I've got a link that would direct you to that webpage if you want to read that report, which is free to access. And here were the partners that work with us on the UK Net Zero Business Census to promote the census and share it amongst their networks. And we are repeating the UK Net Zero Business Census for 2025, launching in May. We hope this becomes an annual exercise so that year on year we can track the progress towards net zero for 2050. And we are currently working with new partners and having conversations with new organizations that would like to get involved. So if you would like to be involved in any capacity, please do get in touch with Planet Mark and myself. So thank you so much for your time. I haven't been able to look at the chat or see any questions, but thank you very much for having me, Dave. And here are just some upcoming webinars for Planet Mark. They're all free. They're all online at this time, and you can register and join anytime you like. Thank you so much for having me, Dave. Let me stop sharing.
Roxy, you're amazing. Thank you so much. That was absolutely brilliant. And we have to say the support the team at Planet Mark in the way that they give businesses the support in navigating net zero and genuine ownership of their carbon footprint is absolutely incredible. We know that we'd be lost without them at Includability and also at Disrupt Agency too. So please do reach out to Roxy, to James, to Andrew and the entire Planet Mark team to book in that call should you wish. You will be very, very well looked after. They're an incredible bunch. Roxy, thank you again so much. You're an absolute star.
Thank you so much. I'll pop my email into the chat in
Please
case anyone's
do.
interested in reaching out. Thank you so much, Dave.
Roxy, that's amazing. Thank you again. You're wonderful. And now, just before we introduce our third and final guest speaker, we'd love you to vote for a charitable project that we can support on your behalf this morning through our partnership with the wonderful B1G1. They're a brilliant global giving platform that support hundreds of charitable projects, both in the UK and internationally, all positively impacting the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So, as ever, you're doing an incredible thing for the planet simply by being awesome and just hanging out with us this morning. Chris is going to drop those options into the chat feed for you now. 3 amazing high impact community projects to you to choose from, and simply pop the letter of your chosen project in the feed, A, B, or C. Project A is providing books to a child in emergency care in the UK. Project B is planting trees for forest protection in India. And Project C is providing shelter repairs for a disadvantaged community in the Philippines. 3 amazing projects. Please choose A, B, or C, and we'll make that support on your behalf. And as you cast your votes, I'm delighted to introduce our third and final guest speaker this morning. A Pride host, LGBTQIA plus inclusion consultant, presenter, speaker, and just an absolute legend who not only empowers but also strengthens communities in the workplace and society. Saski, no pressure at all after that introduction. It's so amazing to have you with us, and the virtual floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Annie and Roxy, as well, for really great informative sessions there as well. I do have some slides, which I'll try and share. If not, I can just talk through some bits. So let me just see if I can share this for 1 second. I'll put it on full screen. Is that coming up? Can I get a thumbs up? Is that something people can see?
Saski,
Right.
we've got you. Brilliant.
Yay, amazing. Okay, so thank you, everybody. It is the tail end of LGBTQ plus History Month, in case you didn't know. So I do want to kind of talk about that, because I think for the community that I am part of, that I represent, it's a really important time for us to kind of raise our voices as much as we can. And often, you know, we talk about kind of history and we talk about the importance of our community, but actually the reality of it is that we're now at a time where it's not just about celebrating the past, it's about really understanding, you know, the present and what our community looks like for the future. And you know, if you look at policy changes across the world, it's not currently looking as promising as we'd hope. However, I am one for hope and change, and I do believe very much in allyship, and I do believe in the power of voice, community, solidarity for us to make change. So whilst I will talk to you a bit about LGBTQ plus History Month, I'll hopefully give us a few tips and reminders more than anything, just about the importance of kind of allyship, and also how we can be active allies and how we can make change. And we can do that in various different ways. I think it's quite important to note as well that, you know, this year's theme for LGBTQIA History Month is actually activism and social change. And I think, God, it couldn't have come at a more important time for our community. So again, just thinking here about kind of what that looks like. It is about celebrating history, but it is about the importance of promoting ongoing activism for equality and inclusion. You know, and again, you know, this theme does highlight the need for that continued progress, and also, you know, whether that's LGBTQ plus rights, but I think inclusion, you know, equity, diversity, and inclusion for all of us, and allyship at the moment is so important, because if we don't kind of start to raise our voices and act now, you know, and we can do that in very small ways, actually. If we don't start to do it now, the future could look very different to what we would hope for. And all that hard work and effort that we've put in to strive forward, all that change that we've worked so hard and fought for, you know, to make safe, inclusive spaces, you know, it's precious time right now. So we really need to act fast. With that, let's just stick to a bit of history. We often talk about LGBTQ plus history. Pride comes up, you know, how Pride started, how the movement for LGBTQ plus communities started. And yes, it did kind of spear from the Stonewall riots, which, as you can see, was sparked off the back of the 28th of June, 1969, back in the Stonewall Inn, actually in America, in New York. I think we're all aware of, you know, the fact that we do have Pride and how Pride has grown. And if you haven't actually been to a Pride yourself, people, make sure this year you do go. It is really fun and it is really a good time. But Pride isn't just about the party. Pride is about, you know, the movement. It's about kind of checking in where we are as a community, where our rights are as a community. And it's how we can think about, you know, what else do we need to do to continue to create that inclusion? And a lot of that comes with allyship. Again, you know, like all forms of allyship, we can't do it alone. You know, any kind of cause, any kind of positive change, you know, we always need support from other communities, and we can find more strength in doing that. So when we think about Pride, you know, it has grown. There is much more visibility. There are laws that have changed, that have passed. You know, we're in a much better position as a community than we've ever been. But there is a lot of work that still needs to be done. And again, that comes with allyship. Now, thinking about, you know, how the past has affected the present and how it's impacted and will impact the future, we think about some of our trailblazers. And there are so many people from our community and allies that have really had a massive positive impact on where, you know, where the movement is today, where the community is today, whether that's through fighting back, you know, at the Stonewall riots. These are some of the kind of often talked about trailblazers for people who kind of fought back at Stonewall during those riots. And that's Marsha P. Johnson, which we have that lovely, gorgeous smile in the middle there. Then we've got Sylvia Rivera, we've got Stormé Delavari, you know, three kind of key people, although there were so many trailblazers that fought back to make change for the community. But the point here is that, you know, it is about taking a stand. It is about speaking out. And when we think about activism, you don't always have to be at the forefront of a march to be an activist. You know, you can be an activist in various different ways, and the small ways are just as important as the big, you know, the big changes that we make for impact. Thinking about that, you know, some other kind of trailblazers when we think about people from our community. Again, Audre Lorde was typically also known for intersectional activism. So thinking about activism against racism, sexism, homophobia and classism, while also advocating for the rights of Black women and the LGBTQ+ community. And then also we've got Harvey Milk there, who is also best known for his activism as an openly gay, or the first openly gay elected official in California. Unfortunately, you know, there's always been struggle, there's always been voice, there's always been, you know, hardship. But again, if we don't have these people that are speaking up and speaking out, like the people we see on our screen here, you know, how do we ever learn to move forward? We need to start thinking about how we do that now as well, because again, if we're thinking about the past, how it impacts the present and how we really want to shape the future, we all have to kind of start really thinking about what do we need to do as allies, or what change can we make, or, you know, what do we want to see for inclusion? I want to just show some statistics here, and these statistics for the UK are taken from Stonewall. Some recent statistics, and I'm just going to pull these all up here like this. And basically just for us to get an idea, because yes, we have prides, yes, we have some great laws and policy in place, and we really have come a long way as a community in terms of the movement. But, you know, let's look at the facts, statistics. When we think about, you know, that 39% of LGBTQ+ employees still feel the need to hide the facts around their sexual orientation and their gender identity, so they don't feel safe to be open and out at work, or they don't feel comfortable. You know, it says a lot for actually what's really happening at grassroots level. Again, 36% of employees have heard discriminatory comments made about an LGBTQ+ colleague. 1 in 4 LGBT people experience negative comments or conduct from customers or clients because of their identity. 12% of LGBTQ+ employees believed that they were fired or dismissed because of their sexual orientation and or gender identity. And again, nearly a third of LGBTQ+ employees did not agree that they could be themselves at work. And of these, 53% have experienced discrimination, such as receiving verbal or physical abuse, or just feeling excluded. So again, you know, whilst, you know, when we think about Pride as a whole, it's a great fun celebration, we do really need to think about, you know, the reality of where we are as a community, and also how we can start to, you know, push forward to continue to create inclusive spaces. And ESGs like this, includability, and platforms like this are so important for us to kind of join forces together, you know, to raise our voices, just to share that form of allyship and think about how we can connect and do that, you know, as a community and as a whole as well. And just finally there, 3 in 10 LGBTQ+ employees, around 31%, wouldn't feel comfortable reporting discrimination if they experienced homophobic or biphobic bullying or harassment. Now, again, if we're not kind of in a space where we don't even feel comfortable to actually report these situations or these incidents, how are we ever going to make change? And we really need to think about having those, as companies, as managers, as, C-suite, at any level, we need to think about how we can create those safe, inclusive spaces so that people do feel comfortable to be able to report, any kind of homophobic, biphobic, transphobic, or any kind of discriminative or predatory other experiences. Because if we don't, we're never going to make change. But we need to do that by building and creating those safe environments to start with. So I know we often talk about allyship, and I'm just going to kind of break it down a bit to what most of us, I'm sure, will know, but it's always good to have a little bit of a reminder, isn't it, in what that looks like. So when we break down allyship, what does that look like? For me, I think it's really about the importance of awareness, educating ourselves. It's one thing to say I'm an ally, but actually we need to understand what are the issues, what are the struggles, what's the cause, and then get a better understanding about how we can really help and support those people, in order to really make change. And we do that often by listening and learning. So learning about those real life lived experiences, and listening to a person's journey, that will give us a true insight to a lived experience. And actually, if you're not in a position where you've got a person where you can actually, have the conversation, we've got so many resources and we've got so much information available to us to learn and understand more about communities and underrepresented and marginalised communities and what that kind of struggles look like, for us to at least be a bit more informed in order to understand why it's important for us to be allies. And with that, again, that's where we can leverage our privileges, because we all have a privilege, or privileges, some more, some less, thinking about what that looks like, for us as individuals, and how we can use it to promote positive inclusion, to recognise our strengths, to create that inclusion both in the workplace and society. And then also thinking about, how we can start contributing to increasing that visibility and driving positive change, And again, it doesn't have to always be these grand, big gestures, because that can often feel quite overwhelming. But think about, what's the small things that I can do? What can I do to show my support? Even that visibility, even some things like wearing an LGBT plus lanyard, a trans inclusion lanyard. The symbol you see on the screen there is actually an LGBT plus allies symbol. So something like that to show that you're an ally, on a very small scale, is a great start as well. And the more we understand about allyship, and the more we can kind of, feel more confident about that, we're actually empowering ourselves, because we're empowering ourselves to have the confidence to speak up and speak out against all inequalities and discrimination, not just faced by the LGBTQ plus communities, but all underrepresented groups. And that's really the power of allyship. And the power of allyship is about being confident in yourself to speak up and speak out, to make change for a positive, inclusive space for all of us to live in, because that's what we all really want. Or a vast majority of us want, I should rephrase that, but we're hoping it's an all very soon. Some examples of how we can do that, just quickly again, taking advantage of spotlighting advanced inclusion, doing that in the workplace, doing that with friends, with family. How can we do that? Having those, conversations and talking about issues, but trying to actually remain calm in talking about those issues where possible. I think there's so much divide right now, and, it's hard not to get so passionate about where you stand on it. And when I say that, what I mean is it's important we are passionate, and we will get angry and we will get frustrated. But actually, if we can't work on how we can have kind of, inclusive conversations where everyone can bring their opinions to hopefully educate each other, and hopefully we can kind of start to diffuse the anger and start to understand and learn what each side is thinking and how we can move forward. Spotlighting our communities, offering those safe space to listen about those lived experiences, and that's how we get understanding as well. I've talked about privilege, using that to echo voice of our colleagues, speaking with them, not for them, doing lots of research and understanding doesn't mean that person's lived experience, because a lived experience is always a one-size-fits-all. Everyone's journey and experience will be different as well. And also encouraging people to become allies, and talking about that, whether that's joining ERG groups, raising awareness for particular underrepresented or marginalised communities through charities, joining charities, just showing your support in general. Think of how you can do that and what that looks like to you. And just in terms to round up of how we can kind of take action on that, it can look like allyship, again, can look like also supporting some LGBTQ plus charities and organisations. Obviously, that's my community, my representation, and it is LGBTQ plus History Month. But what charity is important to you? What can help you to show support to make that social change to create inclusion? Because when we think about intersectional allyship, and the fact is that there's so many different identities, so many different people from all different backgrounds, experiences, that will have lots of different parts of their identities that have been impacted by prejudice or discrimination. But yet we all make up society as a whole. So if we all want to create a safe, inclusive society, let's think about how we can start to action and support all demographics and all support, show our support in all areas rather. So thinking about how you can do that, participate in campaigns, attend Pride events, not just for the party, but also for the movement and for visibility as an ally, and also advocate for, LGBTQ plus rights, speaking out about rights in the workplace, in schools, in communities, but educating ourselves on that. I really think it's so important if we're going to think about how we create an inclusive and safe spaces as well. Thinking about, let's get more, let's do a bit more research on why are we allies, or research on the cause that we're supporting, because we kind of live in a world where people often take social media and what the headline says as face value. And some of us have become a little bit lazy in the sense of we're not fact checking, we're not getting the right information, and we're taking it as face value. And then we end up kind of sleepwalking into this kind of, discriminative, negative kind of society. And we really have worked so hard to avoid that through DEI, and that's why that's such an important kind of part to creating inclusion and safe spaces. So let's get a bit more, we're all entitled to our opinions, but if we can have more fact checking and get the right information, then we can at least make informed decisions. And hopefully again that helps dispel some of the myths, it helps kind of avoid those stereotypes, and also it just creates more inclusive and understanding as a community and a society going forward as well. And lastly, all I will say is we have to make sure that we're also thinking about ourselves and self-care in that, because there is a lot of crap, let's say, going on in the world right now. And whether you're an activist, whether you're doing, inclusion work, part of DE&I and B, or not, just in general, we've constantly got lots of negativity flying at us. There is so much more positivity out there. There is lots of positive news out there if we just look for it. Sometimes we might need to give social media a break to find those positive, other positive platforms. But social media aside, thinking about self-care, if you are feeling overwhelmed, if you are feeling affected by the issues with LGBTQ plus communities right now in our country or across the pond or wherever that may be, there is help and support out there. There are charities out there that are willing to provide support and advice, but also take some time out. There's so many ways. See friends, see family, watch a funny show, or do something that's going to make you feel good, so we don't get consumed with all the negativity that's out there. And ultimately, with doing that, we can got to stay strong physically, emotionally, and mentally, so that when we do feel we're ready to fight back with that social activism and change, we're ready to go. So I will leave it there, because otherwise I'll end up talking forever, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Saski, you're amazing. Thank you so much. So inspirational and powerful and so essential. And I think it's also worth noting that as well as being one of our brilliant includability ambassadors, Saski is also one of our partner experts. She offers exceptional support and runs brilliant training sessions around LGBTQ plus inclusion. So please do get in contact with Saski. If you and your team need guidance, she's absolutely brilliant. We also have another of our wonderful ambassadors, the brilliant Emma Palmer, who's also on with us today. Em is also phenomenal. So we have two extraordinary ambassadors that provide great training, great support, and they are two of the loveliest humans ever. So please, you've got a wonderful community around you to wrap you up, to support you, and to guide you as well around those positive conversations. Saski, you are the best. Thank you so much. Absolutely wonderful to see you as always. And finally, we have a hot date for your diaries. It's, of course, our next employee support group. That will be happening on Wednesday, the 26th of March, same time, 10:30 a.m., where we'll be hosting 3 more fantastic guest speakers. Manuel Schlotauer, inclusion and belonging expert and founder of Hey Manuel. Also, the wonderful Kate Latrobe, neuro inclusion consultant and ADHD Works in-house coach, and the fabulous Stacey Lohman, financial wellbeing expert and co-founder of Money First Aid. Plus, we'll have an update from our very own James Privato on all the additional benefits that have been created to support your journey with includability in 2025. So please do join us. We would love to see you there. And that registration link, forgive me, put my tea back in, is in the chat feed for you now. Thank you so much, Chris. And that brings us to the end of our ESG this morning. A huge thank you to all of our brilliant guest speakers, to Annie, Roxy, and Saski. What absolute legends you all are. Thank you for all of your insights and for sharing your wisdom with us today. And from James, Chris, and myself, and the whole team at Includability and Disrupt Agency, a huge, huge thank you to every single one of you for joining us this morning. And again, please do join us for our Links and Drinks event on the 17th of April at X and Y's Firefields. It would be wonderful to see you all. So until we all meet again in March, please let's keep working in partnership to develop that mentally healthy and inclusive workplace culture. Can't wait to see you all next month. Love to you all and have an incredible rest of your week. Take good care, everyone.